Hey everybody, welcome to Storywise with Eric. Today we're going to be doing a rapid review of Blood and of Blood and Fire of Blood and Fire of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill from the Bloodsworn. No, the Bound and the Broken, not the Bloodsworn. That's a different one that I haven't read, but the Bound and the Broken book one. And just as a reminder for critiquing these books, I don't mean literary critique in the sense that I'm really ripping this thing apart. I'm using some Ivy League doctorate in literature that I earned, which I did not, to analyze this and really dig in deep with a fine-tuned comb. I'm just talking about, as a new reader falling in love with reading, how I felt about the book, what keeps me going, what makes me feel like, yeah, I can skip that, am I going to keep reading the series, things like that, and some takeaways that maybe I found. First things first, enjoyed the book. Overall, highly recommend. It was a fun read. As a coming-of-age tale, you have the rite of passage that these guys are going through. That's how the book starts. And as someone who's in love with the mythopoetic tradition and how old civilization can inform things that are missing in our own lives and why we might not have significance or feel certain things that we used to feel as adults because we don't have rites of passage. We don't have the myths that told us what we needed to know about the world in a magical sense, and mystery has kind of died with the access of information, which is good in progress, but reconnecting with fantasy lets us go back in a simpler time and have simpler messages that are universal and speak to the soul versus just the mind. So starting with a rite of passage was exciting for me. I got angry at the antagonist, the petty tyrant, as I call them, which are not the main antagonist, but little a-holes that pop up here and there, stealing things and, ultimately being a thorn in the side of our burgeoning heroes. But it's difficult. Like, there's some really tough stuff early on in this book, and it's one of those books that you don't know who's going to make it. There's no guarantee. I think some people crave that, oh man, will they, won't they survive? I'm not necessarily one of those people. I want my main characters to survive, and this takes that security and removes it. So you really don't know. So you spend time developing a relationship with the characters in the book, and it's a 500-page book, and you spend a lot of time with these people and you worry about them, which is kind of the point. That's how a lot of people want their fiction. I don't need it that way because I love loving my characters and spending time with them. And again, I don't want to give away spoilers, but that, my friends, is a dragon egg. So there is an element of dragons that reminded me a series I watched with my kids, The Legend of Erebos, the Dragon Prince, and it has similar vibes to me. Now, we're not talking exactly, but it's similar in the egg part and the birth and all those elements that are in that show can be found in here. So it made me feel connected to the story, like I understood it on a level. And that's a good thing for me. The characters in the story, again, I mentioned in the Drizzt books. If you haven't seen that, I did a rapid review on those recently. And I found the same thing in this, where I don't know that the characters are written in a voice that is different for me, but it's not a deal breaker for me either. Once you get into some of the more fantastical creatures, you get some like the giant, he has a different way of speaking. And I appreciate that Ryan put in a cultural thing where you have to almost learn how the giant speaks, so you can not just say, "Hi, how you doing?" You have to go through this ritual process of speech and response to speak with respect. It was a nice touch. I think the fight scenes are really well written. They're enjoyable. The action is paced well. You are jumping between a couple different stories, and they're easy to keep track of, which is a tough thing for me in some books that I haven't read. When I read the review and it says you're reading from multiple perspectives, that's a tough sell for me because I don't know how well I can keep track of those things, but Ryan does a good job of giving you multiple storylines that are easy to keep track of. And sometimes it's just a jump out and then a jump back in. It's not spending a ton of time in this world, then spending a ton of time in this world. It's nicely done. It's managed well. And I assume that in the next book, because it's twice the size of this one, you're going to get a lot more of that. I don't know that for a fact, but that's my guess. And that brings me to a point of 540 pages is sort of my threshold of overwhelm. And the next one's, I think, 900 or 1100. I can't remember how many pages. It's big, and it'll be the biggest thing I've ever read. So I'm not sure when I'll get into that one. But honestly, that has been a sticking point for me to want to build up my tolerance and my ability to read bigger books before I jump to it. But I don't want to speak like that's a negative thing. That's just me expressing my own journey. And people have written 1,200 pages. Brandon Sanderson, right? His books intimidate the hell out of me too. But I did read Tress of the Emerald Sea, which I'll review as well, and won't give that away right now. But they're not all 1,200 page books. I know that. But entry point level, I want to keep them a little bit friendly so I can build up to it. But I'm getting close. I don't know when I'm going to read it, like I said, but I will. I do appreciate that there's a character named Eric because, hello. In seriousness, the main thing that I appreciated about this book that I thought was inspiring isn't necessarily the content. It's the fact that it's independently published. And as an aspiring author, it's been tough out there to get publishers to look at your book or for agents to like it because they're looking for something else. When you're writing something that you're passionate about, it can be defeating. And then looking at self-publishing, that's a whole different skill set. That's why I say I respect it and appreciate this book, because he did something incredible. He did something that I think is incredibly difficult to do. Not only to write a cohesive, wonderful tale that is enjoyable to read and takes you on a nice little trip through a fantasy world, but he published it himself and it did really well. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the next few were self-published as well, and then he got picked up by a publisher. I'm not 100% on that, but I think that's the case. And that's how it is in self-publishing. It feels like once you've proven that you'll sell, then they'll look at you when they wouldn't have looked at it in the first place. Again, I don't know if that's what he did, but I've had 50 rejection letters for my previous novel that, I'm going to self-publish and put it up for free just to get it out there possibly. But it holds me back in my second novel that I'm working on now. And for my third one that I'm seeding out ideas for is, how am I going to get this out there? And he demonstrated that you absolutely can. And I don't know that he has a template for you, but I am tremendously respectful to people who can do that, because it's something that I don't think that I have the skill to do, or I don't have the mental capacity, again, like to play Dungeons and Dragons and comprehend it all, or to self-publish a book and market it and be that person. Now, maybe if I had a partner, maybe that would be possible. That's a whole different conversation, though. And I wish I was intellectual enough to be able to do Dungeons and Dragons and make decisions. I'm very indecisive when it comes to those things. But I would recommend Of Blood and Fire if you're into looking into the fantasy world. This would be a good starting point. I felt like the language was very accessible. It was not overly poetic. And I appreciate that, because sometimes the excessive poetry can stop you from reading it. For instance, The Shadow of the Gods, I will try to read again, but I didn't make it past page 20, I think, because the language was not in a way that I could flow. It felt like if I'm talking to you like this, I can flow smoothly. I can talk from the heart. I can share just the stream of consciousness, and I flow. And that's how I like to read. I like my books to go that way when I read them. But if I have to think like this and my inner monologue is choppy and I'm trying to think, and that's how my reading of that book was, it was very ha and ha. Not because it was overly complex, but my mind couldn't get into the style, the metronome of his pacing and the way he structured his sentences. So that's a learning thing for me. I have to adjust to that, and I have to come back to it. Again, I'm not tabling it forever. I'm just tabling it for now. Same with The Hobbit, with Tolkien. I read it like this, and then some parts are like this, and I'm like, oh, this is great listening to Bilbo talk, like I love the mind you, good afternoon, and all this kind of stuff. It's so funny and fun for me, and that whimsy is there. But then it goes off script that way, and I start to get all like this, and it's hard. It's becomes work for me, and I don't want it to be work. I want to build up to that level. So again, I'm going to work on that over time. It's just going to take me a while I'm reading these other books like Of Blood and Fire that let me flow through it, that let me ride along the lazy river and enjoy the hell out of my little afternoon and look forward to my morning and evening reading time, because I know I'm going to have a good time. And that's what you get with this book. So hopefully if you found any benefit to that, you'll go check out the book. And if you've read it, you can let me know how you felt about the book. Again, really clearly, really enjoyed Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill, and I'm glad I read it. And if you have any recommendations, because I like this book, drop it in, because I'm always building my reading list, my to-be read list, and will be drawing randomly from that as I finish books so I can get a list. I like being surprised. I don't always want to pick that one. I want to spin a wheel and then pick that one. So, good book, Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill. Highly recommend. I'll be back with another review shortly. And until next time, journey well, my friends.